I am the way, the truth, and the life. The only way to the Father is through me. And I had an incredible revelation that the destination of Christianity is not heaven. The destination of Christianity is the Father. And Jesus came to show us what the Father was like. The two great pictures that God gives us in the Bible of Himself are Father and marriage. And so what the devil does is he completely destroys the picture of Father. And so we have alcoholic fathers and authoritarian fathers and absent fathers and abusive fathers. And we have divorce and brokenness and unwed children. And so we have these two pictures of father and marriage completely destroyed. And so people don't know what God is like. I've asked people to explain their dads in one word. I've been all over the world. I've heard everything from kind to generous to absent to stingy to violent to never met him to loving. I've heard all these different words to describe the Father. Maybe you can take a moment now to write one word that would describe your own Father. And but this is how Ephesians, and I use the NIV Bible, this is how Ephesians describes it. It says, I keep asking the glorious Father. Or the ESV says, the Father of glory. I've never ever heard anyone describe their fathers as glorious, ever. But our Bible describes our God in heaven as glorious. Say it with me, glorious. He says this, I keep asking the glorious Father that He might give you the spirit of wisdom and revelation so that you might know Him better. Know Jesus better, know the Father better. Actually, it's both. I've had a glorious marriage, been married 27 years, but there was one time in my life that it was going tough, and I remember clearly going before God, and I went to Him, I said, Father, I would like to speak to you about my wife. And as clear as I've never heard the audible voice of God, I've learned how to answer His promptings in my heart. As clear as day, I felt God say, do you mean my daughter? And I believe when I get to heaven one day, God will ask me, first question, how did you look after my daughter? Not how big your church was, how many deacons did you have? How did you look after my daughter? And it's exactly the same with my language. Everything is seen through the Father. You see, I can't gossip about somebody who is the Son of God. Our Father who art in heaven, I'd like to talk to you about one of my elders, and he says, do you mean my son? And so friends, the way I talk to people, the way I talk about people, is through the understanding of a Father who art in heaven. Jesus says, I only say what my Father wants me to say and how to say it. So not only were the contents of Jesus' words under the Father, but even the tone of His voice was under the command of His Father. And so if we are going to change this world, friends, we need to be baptized afresh in the Father heart of God and treat everybody from a heavenly perspective in a different way. And I promise you, we will start to change this world. This friend of mine, Grant, he lost 13 or 14,000 rand. He sold the car. Mr. Lazarus has a very big car dealership in Centurion. Jag and Land Rover and Ford and Kia. Remarkable man. And he lost 13 or 14, I can't remember the exact amount of money. And his dealer principal came to him and put the file down. He said, Mr. Lazarus wants to see you. And he walked into Mr. Lazarus's office trembling. He thought, I'm about to get fired because the very first deal I've done, I've lost money. And he put the file on his table and he said, Mr. Lazarus opened it up and looked at him and he said, my boy, you've lost money. He said, yes, Mr. Lazarus, I'm very sorry. And Mr. Lazarus closed the folder and gave it back to him. He said, what's the way forward? He said, no, you continue to work for me. He said, everybody can make mistakes. He said, I will pay your school fees. Just don't do it again. And that just is an emotional. Who's going to pay the school fees, friends, of the people who don't have fathers? Who are the bosses? Who are the headmasters of schools? Who are the pastors in churches? Who's going to pay the school fees for the next generation that make mistakes when they've had no access to fathers to care for them and love them?